6:03 p.m. So we're going to do an approval of the agenda, and I get a motioner. Dowd motions. I got Matthew's second. I'm going to take that by consensus if no one has any issues with that. Moving forward to the territorial acknowledgement. Pursuant to Waterloo Undergraduate Student Association Policy 50, the Board of Directors acknowledges that the University of Waterloo is on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. Our organization operates on the Haldeman Tract, land promised to 6 nations, which includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. On that note, I imagine if we're reviewing the policy manual, we might need to update that language if this is no longer policy 50 or even in the thing. Anyways, that is something to be mindful of. Also, the university is doing a lot of work on its indigenization strategy. So the folks who also have senator hats would have heard about that. So if anyone is interested and would like to hassle myself or Matthew or Catherine on what the university is doing about that, feel free to. Pursuant to Board Procedure 2, Section 2, Subsection 6, the chair poses the following question in relation to any items of business on the agenda for this meeting. Does any director have an actual, perceived, or potential conflict of interest?
Steph. Yes. I was going to raise, so I'm going to bring up points later on in this meeting, just about PD days and where the officer roles sit with those. Or sorry, not PD days, like PD funding and how that works. Steph and I are going to be bringing a document later on, but I was just going to bring it up at officer reports. So I just wanted to flag that I am obviously biased in that. So our process is I'm going to give a little bit of an update on kind of what we're thinking. I'm going to pass along a document and then probably do a closed session conversation without us, and then an open session conversation again without us. And then if you have any questions at the end, and then we'll sort it. But we're doing that probably our next meeting, I believe. That's all good with everyone.
Yeah, I'll flag that I have the same sort of conflict of interest. So if anyone is uncomfortable with me facilitating the beginning conversation with that, we can switch over to Matthew being the chair for that. I think it should be fine, but also me saying that I think it should be fine is also probably a conflict of interest. So feel free to interrupt me at any point and ask to switch over to Matthew during that point, I guess. Okay, well, moving on, overview of the policy manual. So this is going to be a presentation by our governance consultants. So take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, Steph, and nice to see everyone again. I hope you had a good Christmas. Can everybody see that presentation as I have shared it?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So, WUSA policy manual. Just to give ourselves a, sorry, I've just gone through the whole thing. Now I have to go back to the front.
That was fast.
Yeah.
Get a new logo.
Let's try this again. So, just to give everybody a sense of how we come to be here at this meeting and with this deliverable. So, the consultants, being Michael and myself of Risser and Hughes, were hired in the fall of 2021. To perform a governance review of WUSA and provide recommendations to improve WUSA's governance. That review included interviews with current and previous student representatives and WUSA staff, and the central conclusion and recommendation of that review, which you all know because you adopted it, was to move from basically a work group board model type, typical of student associations, to a governing board model type, more common amongst larger not-for-profits, which you certainly meet the test of that in terms of size and budget and full-time staff, and that this would largely rectify your governance challenges. So pursuant to that, Michael and I were then contracted to develop a board policy manual in line with this governance transformation, and we undertook that project last fall in 2022. and you will have the deliverable at the end of this meeting tonight in a draft form for your review and revision. So the interviews, we did the same thing, conducted interviews with key stakeholders, officers, directors, senior staff, etc. We examined and where applicable incorporated aspects of previous policy. And the main deliverable, we drafted a board policy manual in alignment with applicable legislation and regulations, corporate bylaws, best practices, and stakeholder feedback. So what did we hear throughout the interview process? So the governance system, and this is speaking to the new governance system. So there was a lot of discussion about how it's easier and faster to get things done. There's a clearer and simpler path to approval and action. It's easier to govern due to simplification of the governance system. Further clarity is needed on function of governance, role clarity, and how the board does its job. And a policy manual is needed to provide guidance on how to use the system. I'm sure you are all familiar with my now well-worn phrase that you have a computer with no operating system. The values to be reflected in terms of what you guys wanted to see reflected in the policy manual in the organization, obviously student-led and driven. Democratic, equitable, accessible, inclusive, culturally sensitive, transparent, responsive, accountable, and action-oriented. So Michael and I took that away. The general policy manual approach is to try and be accessible, clear, and written in plain language. There was a lot of discussion about simplification and a reduction in the amount of just general policy there is, not in its scope or its comprehensiveness, but in the actual number of words, which we've done fairly well. We're trying to be concise yet comprehensive, and obviously compliant with all the relevant documents. So where were the policy needs and gaps identified? So clearly defined roles and responsibilities for board and committees, clarification on the dividing line between governance and board and operations and staff, policy on how advocacy is conducted, and obviously director accountability to each other in terms of performance monitoring and evaluation. So what did Michael and I do having gotten all that information? So we drafted a policy manual that aligns with stakeholder feedback and best practice and all the relevant documents insofar as we were able. This should be comprehensive and includes appropriate templates for different matters that the board will have to do to govern, so for ease of use. And obviously, as I suggested, this will be disseminated at the conclusion of the meeting for your review. So what are the next steps? So the review of the policy manual by board and senior management. We know you have the 2 board review meetings this coming Saturday and the following Saturday, and Michael and I will be available at the end of those meetings to answer questions or review comments with you and address any concerns. And we're hoping to have 1 review meeting with ourselves and staff to answer questions and address concerns. So feedback and edits may be incorporated in the final manual submitted in February by board approval up until mid-February when we submit our final work product. What gets included will rest with us in terms of us holding the pen. And then after that final submission, you guys can take what we deliver to you and reform and revise it however you see fit for your needs. So this product that we're going to share at the end of the meeting tonight is obviously a draft. We have endeavored to be comprehensive, but this stuff is sometimes quite systematic, and so nobody gets it completely right. So we're looking for your help in reviewing, both for your general feedback, but also, you know, anything you can think of in terms of making sure it aligns with applicable legislation and the corporate bylaws, reviewing it for internal consistency within and between the different policies, just general editing, typos, etc., and general gaps of anything that you feel once you've read it is missing. In terms of transitioning, so what we're proposing, because we've written the manual, but there's going to be a lot of other things that emanate from that, because there were a lot of things in your old policies and procedures that weren't really policies and procedures, or where policies and procedures weren't delineated in a way that, you know, was appropriate. So we would propose that you approve the manual whenever you see fit, but that the transition date to repeal your previous policies and implement the new manual would be May 1st, 2023. The reason for this is that it allows board and staff time to develop the new procedures that might follow this policy manual, standing committee terms of reference based on what we've suggested or what you change it to, Advocacy position statements, which if you repealed all of the different policies, you'd have no advocacy position statements, and we've provided a template on that for you to do those. I know you have a very comprehensive board handbook. I don't know if you'd want to redo that. And then, of course, the operational policies and procedures that would flow from the manual to govern the staff would also have to be drafted. Another recommendation that you can take or leave is that we've talked about in the policy manual what a revised long-range planning cycle would look like. And I think it's worth considering revising and renewing your long-range plan the next governing year to take effect May 1st of the following year. And you'll see when you read the manual how we expect that would go. So other than that, any questions? Clear as mud, Denver?
I guess I just have a question around review process. So I just wanted to clarify for everybody. So if we look at it the next 2 weeks, we'll be offering some suggestions. What do we think turnaround would be? Say 5% of the document had suggestions. What do we think turnaround for us to see how those are revised and reincorporated?
5%? A week.
Okay. So if we're like the 5 to 10% range within the month is reasonable.
Oh yeah, no, that's very reasonable. So we've reduced the word count considerably with intention. So I did a quick search of the documents, and your existing policies and procedures for both your board and your student council weigh in at about, I think it's 135,000 words, which is excessive to say the least.
A lot of words.
That's a lot of words for a small organization. I often use the analogy with folks that the U.S. Constitution, including all 28 amendments, is 13 pages. So you don't need that many words for a much smaller organization. So our policy manual is 11,000 words. Now, there will, of necessity, be, I'm sure, procedures that emanate from that, and advocacy position statements and operational policies and procedures and other things. But I would imagine it being much shorter. So I imagine, Denver, the turnaround time could be reasonably quick.
Awesome, thank you. And also I just added a little tidbit of McMaster fun in there if people want to.
The MSU had more. Yes, one of my favorite ones was that you guys currently have more committees than the Ontario legislature, although that's not what's recommended.
Okay, nice.
Huh.
We're winning.
Any further questions?
I guess I'm wondering, just for the review, sorry, I forgot to raise my hand. It takes more buttons to raise my hand than to unmute my mic, so I forgot. During the board review sessions, I'm wondering what the most meaningful way to provide feedback, like how should we be thinking about how we're providing feedback or asking for changes?
Yeah, and so there's a couple things. One, in terms of what could be beneficial to us, would be just general reaction plus the 4 things we talked about. You know, does it align with the Act? Does it align with the corporate bylaws? Does it align with itself? You know, are there any typos or things that could be improved? And are there any gaps where you're like, oh, there should be, you know, a section in this policy on this item or a policy on that, or those kinds of things. I'd caution against, you know, trying to fill it back up to 135,000 words again, right? And thinking really about how the system is intended to operate and why the manual does what it does. But I think that would be really helpful, Catherine, because nobody's perfect, including me. So, you know, there may be things, and that's why we do this in a draft and have these review sessions with clients to say, you know, are we hitting it right? You know, there may be some eccentricity. I'm trying to put 2 words together there. Of your organization that, you know, we haven't thought about. I will note that there's an explanatory note that's going to come with the manual that talks about a few things that, you know, you may be expecting to see that aren't in there and why that's the case, or that talks about things that aren't manual appropriate stuff, but we think you need to give some consideration to from a governance perspective. So between the note and the manual, it should be hopefully fairly clear. And just general questions. I mean, if you have questions about how this looks like it's intended to operate and who does what and who's accountable to whom and how that all works, then, you know, we're always happy to hear those. Thanks, Catherine.
I have
Denver?
one more question.
Shoot.
Sorry to toss all these in. So again, for kind of the effectiveness of these sessions, I just wanted to cover a couple questions. So one would be around if we have things that we feel like should be in there, but I guess it's a gray area for manual appropriate. Is it okay if we just create a box of kind of shelved ideas and then, okay.
Yeah,
My next question was around specific wording, or if like there was a specific clause that we felt was very important to have as a board, and like unilaterally folks are pretty on board. I just want to clarify, I guess, do you have any suggestions if we have very particular wording, if we should be drafting the entire phrase or clause, or just taking the wording that we want specifically in the intent and then flipping it over to you to incorporate, because it might not make sense to have its own clause. It might make sense as part of another piece of the manual.
Yeah, so what I'd say is the only thing that Michael and I throughout this entire process have been pretty staunchly committed to is the idea that everything that we do has to work with the model, right?
Yeah.
That you've chosen to adopt. So
yeah.
The only thing I'm really probably going to push back on really strongly would be things where I feel like it compromises alignment and the effectiveness of the model. Other than that, I'm very open to suggestions, you know, and we can work through those. What I would say is if there's something where like I absolutely disagree with you on, and I've said very clearly, like, we'll hold the pen until we deliver the deliverable. There's nothing wrong with you guys drafting language to amend. You know what I mean? In the interim. And yeah. I'll keep you very up to speed about any changes that would be made to the manual as I make them.
Okay. And I guess the last question is around, I'm sure if we're going to a factor of 10 reduction here?
I mean, when you include all the supplementary documents that are likely to emanate, it might be a factor of 3, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah. My only worry there too is also about vagueness and kind of how to interpret it. It's funny that you brought up the US example, because I was actually going to bring this up. Like, that's why you'll have certain cases and rulings that this is how we address this scenario. Mm-hmm. I guess, how would you advise around some of those pieces where we go, okay, this is like a really good working concept. It, you know, overarching gives us a really good idea how to do this, but in practice, it leaves a lot of, you know, up to discrepancy, and hypothetically say our group feels somewhat uncomfortable with that. And we say, we want a pretty hard line of, you know, I'll use the hypothetical of if it was an acclaimed victory for the presidential election, and it wasn't super clear on what to do beyond, you know, how an election functions, how votes are counted hypothetically. Mm-hmm. Would you suggest that we are making little amendments? Because I guess we get back into that space again if we're constantly adding like addendums to this document of, well, this is what we do in this case. You know, in 60 years, we'll have a document the same size.
Yeah.
So I guess just in those, is it better to try and find a clearer stance, or keep it vague? Or what's your professional opinion on that type of scenario?
So I'd say 2 things. One, my general rule of thumb for a board of directors is that a director should be able to read the board policy manual in about 2 hours. Right? And if you're starting to get up to the point where it takes more than 2 hours, I'd say you're going beyond what you need to do there. Because I think to your point, Denver, the policy language should be specific in the sense that it should give clear direction that everybody understands. That might be interpreted slightly differently here and there, but generally everybody understands how to operate the manual, right? It's effectively an operating manual for the organization. So, you know, there should be a level of clarity about that. And then the second, the other thing is to make sure that you're sticking to a governance level of policy making and not diving into an operational level. So most boards, including your own. Oh, did we lose Denver?
I'm still here. I'm just coughing.
Okay, no worries. Most boards, including your own, wind up with that 135,000 word sets of manuals. Like you guys have those manuals, I'd say, for principally two reasons. One, because you had two governing bodies, and that led to those different things and procedures being duplicated twice in a lot of instances. And B, because there was a lot of devolution into what is really operational detail. And so when you're thinking about a policy level, what you want to do is, the metaphor is to have your arms around the organization without your fingers in it. And the more your fingers are in it, the less your arms are around it. So the more you're doing, the less you're actually controlling. And so all that by way of saying, in terms of where you think the boundary is, you can tighten that control, right? As long as you don't tighten it in a way that precludes accountability or makes it unclear who's doing something, and then everybody has their fingers in everything and nobody's accountable for anything. So we'll work through all that. I think the best step at this stage is, you know, I'm really excited to see how you guys react to this, because I think it's going to be really interesting, and I think it's going to lead to a lot of really good questions, and we'll hash through it. But yeah, I mean, once you see the content, I think a lot of those things will become clear to you, and you'll know if you agree with them or not, or where you want to push back, or where you may have suggestions.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff?
Hi, Matt. Just a quick question out of curiosity. Since this was a pretty significant rewrite, were there any sections or parts that you found maybe some challenge in constructing, or that you thought required more discussion, or that you anticipate may be slightly more of a topic to discuss?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, Jeff. I would say writing something like this, so the difference between the approach that I think the new manual takes versus your old documents is that I would say the approach under the new manual is much more of a systemic approach. So policies aren't looked at in isolation from one another as one-offs. They're really to provide a whole system of policies that create an operating manual for you as the board to run the organization. So what's really hard when you're doing that is not necessarily this policy or that, because, you know, I've done enough of these that I can crib language from here and there and, you know, put it all together. But really, and this is why I said internal consistency is one of the big things we need your guys' help with, just to confirm where we're at. Is the real hard thing is making it all fit together, because it's very ecological in the sense of, as soon as I change one policy, it could have ramifications for 5 other ones. So I would say there was some stuff that was able to be drawn from what you guys had, certainly the intent of it, but the system was so different that, you know, really it was a more of a from scratch kind of thing. Does that make sense, Jeff?
Yeah, thanks a lot.
I know this is all riveting stuff, guys, governance and policy manuals and all that. The whole point is to let you guys focus on the substance of the business, because you're not so busy focused on the manual. That's why you simplify your governance structure. Any other questions?
I guess just to keep scope of our conversations as well, how much do you expect us to be coming back with rewrites and suggestions, if you had to anticipate as a percentage approximately?
I don't know.
Okay.
I really have no idea.
Okay. We also don't. Like, that's why we plan 2 weekends. We might be done in 3 hours. We might be both full weekends, right?
Yeah. No. So, hey, listen. The more the better. Like, okay. It's not bad to have more eyes on this and working through it in detail and all that stuff, we're always open to hearing what you guys have for feedback. And what I would say is, if you want something materially different than what we've drafted, then that's a different conversation than if there's, 20% or under of edits, or, this, that, or the other, and it all works in accordance with the model.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
No problem, Dimmer. Anything else? I'm sorry for ruining 2 of your weekends. Okay, well, if there's nothing else, then I'll let you guys proceed with the meeting. I will stay on the line in case you have any questions from a governance perspective you need me to answer. And I will send the manual and the explanatory note out as soon as we're done.
Sounds good. So we have no special orders, so we're moving on to general orders. So item 4.1, approval of the minutes of the meeting held on December 7th. Be it resolved that the board approves the public minutes of December 7th, 2022 as presented. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Ed moves. Jeff seconds. Okay. Were there any corrections or whatnot folks would like to make to the minutes? Okay, seeing none, I will take it by consensus that we are approving that item. Moving on to next item, approval of the date and time for the 2023 annual general meeting. It resolved that board approves the date, time, and location of the 2023 annual general meeting as Tuesday, March 21st at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the Student Life Center. I will take myself as the mover of that. Do I have a seconder? Okay, Dad seconds. So I included a briefing note. Can I just get like a general sort of raise of hands of who has read the briefing note? Okay. I'm going to ask you to take the opportunity to open up that document and take a quick read through. I'll give you 3 minutes in case you have any questions or whatnot. I'll just keep talking generally in the meanwhile. Basically, by law, we have to hold an annual general meeting. That's really important. Our procedures have specific restrictions over when they can occur, how much notice needs to be given, et cetera, et cetera. So the date I proposed, the subsequent sort of schedule keeps that in mind. Basically, the sort of conversation I want to have intermixed with this is whether or not we wanted to do it online, in person, or a hybrid. It looks like, according to Ontario law and our own bylaws, we are allowed to do either one of the 3. I've asked IT to provide me some feedback on what would make the most sense for them, and they're going to get back to me on that. But just want to have a little conversation about that now. And what I'm going to ask we do is that we approve it to be initially in person first, and then we'll hear back from IT. And if, we think we want to change it, we can change it, because notice will not be sent out until the 30th. That's the earliest day it can happen. So we can still change our minds, but I do want to make sure staff have the date and time at very least in their calendars so that they can prep out their materials for it. Cool. Okay. Seeing question from Jay, 3 p.m. Admittedly a little arbitrary. I tried to pick a time where people were on campus roughly, but also late enough in the day that they also were done classes. If anyone has very strong opinions and would like to move somewhat, I would say that if it's online, it probably warrants moving. If it's in person, probably gonna have better luck and closer in the afternoon, because as soon as you get later, people tend to go home at that point. I see Denver's hand first and then Mun.
So just on the 3 p.m. thing, anyone know roughly what night classes are like? Because generally I'd have a suggestion for a later time, like end of standard classes endings. That way people could attend. 6 to 9 or 7 to 10. I just have a thought that it should be as accessible as possible, even if it's a little inconvenient to run. So something like 7 to 10 is probably more accessible than a 3 o'clock, but I know it's less ideal for some. But overall, more people can attend if they want to, if that makes sense. So open to thoughts on that.
And actually, is yours a direct follow-up, Catherine and Matthew?
Yeah, I was just going to respond to that.
Okay.
Follow-up, but I also know that.
Which is, I guess, I'm coming at from the perspective of specifically not having an engineering style schedule where it is just like back-to-back classes. I think that, like, honestly, you're going to catch as many people at 3 p.m. as you will at like 5 p.m. My main consideration is people who are on co-op who might want to come. It's kind of funky because I'm also in an arts class that's from like 6:30 to 9:30. So you never know what's going on.
Can I suggest maybe that we have a conversation about what modality we want first? Because I think that's going to have implications on the conversation about time. Okay. Matthew?
A couple of things. I think that I think that one of our big concerns here should be making sure we get quorum in order to act. Our quorum's a lot lower than it used to be, but it's hard to get people. So I do have in mind that I think it's easier to get people to come and show up if it has at least an in-person component. You know, you can have food and things like that, and then they can get toward quorum, which is nice. So my thoughts are kind of it should be in-person or hybrid. Hybrid's hell to operate. I guess that depends on IT view and also our view of whether that is like, you know, you're able to properly engage as a student online in a hybrid meeting. And if our opinion is that no, you cannot properly engage as an online student in hybrid meeting, then maybe we shouldn't do it hybrid. Do it hybrid and go with either completely. The other piece around that is we're not going to be able to find a time that works for everybody for all kinds of students. And, you know, once you start getting late, like 7 to 10, I think Denver said, like people are tired and want to go home. And they sure don't want to log on to their computers then to join our meeting. I think just having proxying being something as available as possible is important. But on that, I see, Steph, you've made a note in here about, you know, the existing board procedures written for the old model that counselors hold up to, like, you know, 5 proxies. And, you know, you see that, you know, argument can be made that a board replaces the counselor. We can just like amend that though to say whatever we think makes sense. Particularly, we're in a position where we have far fewer directors now than we used to have counselors. So I think that when we're looking at this, and if we want to even just adopt something just for the purpose of the next general meeting until we write the more proper long-standing board procedures, we should adopt something saying that directors could hold like, I don't know, 15 proxies, something like that, just so we have a large amount of capacity. So we don't like run out of people we can assign proxies to if there's a lot of people that have an interest. And that we have to have that capacity because we are never going to find a time that works for all students.
Okay. I think, okay, I'll go Naman, then Jack.
Yeah, is this my direct response or is this the other thing I wanted to say? I guess it
You
doesn't
can say
matter.
whatever you want.
Okay, sure. I'll say both things. Sounds good. So I will caution that yes, we can't find time for literally every single person, but I am a bit wary of the engineering thing in particular because that eliminates like an entire faculty of students, right? Because from what I understand, maybe the engineers can correct me here, most of them have classes reaching into 5 p.m.
Typically it's 4:30 to 5:30ish.
Yeah.
All my classes end except today.
And I remember this being a discussion when we were talking about the new board stuff. Like one of the reasons we had faculty representatives was exactly because one of the things they pointed out was general meetings used to be held at early points in the morning and none of the engineers would show up and none of the engineers had representation at the general meeting. And this is just something that we're heading into again. So let's try not to like repeat our past mistakes. The other thing, and a substantially more minor one, if we are going to have the meeting at that date, we will be following Eastern Daylight Time. So if we have the meeting at Eastern Standard Time, it will be really confusing for everyone.
Oh, I tried to put in this time zone.
Yes.
Whatever normal people do.
ET, so.
Yeah, ET is the
Is it
thing.
not?
Yeah. Just put
Did I-
ET and then ET is whatever it's right now.
Oh, okay. Let's see here.
Oh, get it.
Yeah.
Or extraterrestrials then.
Yeah, they're them too, but yeah, they're not.
Jay,
Yeah, but
your
it doesn't
hand
matter.
Yeah, like I remember last year, like we had the meeting at 5 p.m. and we were able to reach the quorum maybe 5 p.m. is a better time, in my opinion. And I would actually recommend like we have the meeting entirely online, because if we have a hybrid meeting, it's gonna be a very chaotic. Like some people online was trying to raise hand, some people in person was trying to raise hand. Like for example, like I raised my hand like a few minutes ago, and actually it should be my speaking turn before Norman's speaking turn, but apparently Norman is in person, so he speaks first, but that's okay. But if we have a general meeting, we have lots of hands, it's gonna be very chaotic, in my opinion. So maybe we can just have it entirely online, and we have Teams, so there should be any like tech difficulties with Teams.
Yeah. Okay, just trying to reach sort of a thing of consensus. What I'm hearing is A, I need to learn a little bit more about time zones. B, maybe something around 5 or 5:30 as a start time would make it more accessible while also not putting us super late into the night. And also, we're mostly deciding between completely in person or completely online, because hybrid is going to be a doozy. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of nods here.
There's a venue if we have it completely in person.
It would probably either be the Black and Gold room or the Great Hall.
Oh, that room doesn't have a projector.
Oh, okay. Well, that's another thing. Well, we could probably set it up.
We'd probably just wheel in TVs.
And that room doesn't have like audio or speaker or microphone. There's nothing.
Okay, moving on to Marie.
Just on a note of being worried about people getting there or not, I will say from a non-engineering background that like I almost have no lit classes, and most people I know in upper years have no lit classes, and people want to go home. So if we are gonna have an in-person meeting, it might be useful to have something beforehand to kind of incentivize people to stay on campus. I don't know if this could be like a networking, mingling type eat, but just to kind of incentivize people to stay, because most people that at least I know in my faculty, like if there's 3 hours of free time, they'll just go home and not attend. So having something kind of to kill the time in between might be useful to keep attention and to keep attendance until the meeting starts.
Okay, going on to Denver, and then I'm going to motion an amendment. And then we can still have this conversation about online or in person, offline anyways.
So I guess I just had a few thoughts and kind of questions to help muddy the waters for everybody. I guess I see some pros and cons in each. Generally in the last couple of years, and it might have been a COVID thing and just generally lull in student engagement, but online for these types of things, my experience has been draws less than in person. Part of that is because if there's something in person, it's easier to say, hey, by the way, there's snacks. Just, put up a sign and people even drop in for a little bit. And, once they're through the door, they might be a little more inclined to stay. So I do see that, but I also see an accessibility boost to being online. So just factors for people to consider on all this. Also, I think there's been some really good points around the timing. So I just appreciate people raising those.
Okay, so I'm gonna motion to amend such that, EST gets, replaced with ET and start time, starts at 5.
And
I'm on seconds, can I get all opposed? All abstaining? Okay, seeing none, we set it on that time. We'll continue to have conversations within the Teams chat. I'll chat with IT and figure out the options and maybe circulate that ahead of time. We can do a little bit of a straw poll vote to decide whether or not it exists as an agenda item or not. Okay, cool. Also just want to draw folks' attention to the briefing note in terms of possible items for the agenda to be included there. So if you have any proposals you want in there that needs to happen at a general meeting, start brainstorming now. Okay, moving on to item 4.3, adoption of the 2022-2023 WUSA roadmap implementation schedule. So you folks should have received a very long document that is the implementation schedule, as well as a briefing note. So just to summarize that, so we've adopted our annual plan. The annual plan is based more broadly on the long-range plan. So it exists to communicate the org's priorities, but also as an accountability framework for us to hold Suzanne accountable, to holding the staff accountable, and for the members to hold us accountable for doing what we said we would. So the staff have gone ahead and prepared sort of a timeline for when they expect stuff to be done, as well as for items that were more general, pointed specifically what actions would be taken there. So it's really important, I think, to make sure that we're very sort of clear in communicating with Suzanne and the staff that we're underneath her very sort of clear expectations. So this is the timelines that have been proposed by them. If things need to be reshuffled in terms of priority or whatnot, this is the opportunity to have that conversation. Otherwise, it's going to have to go through an official amendment or whatnot, but understanding this package here is what's going to happen and whatnot. So I don't want to hear any, why is this thing not done when it's not listed to be done? Okay. Cool. I will give folks a little bit of time to maybe scroll through it in case you didn't have the opportunity.
You have to schedule a group agenda reading session ahead of each board meeting.
When would we settle the proxy number discussion?
When do we?
Yeah.
I mean, the answer is sort of whenever we like, I guess. It's just a board procedure. It's probably a good discussion for next meeting once we have a little bit more certainty around, like, other things. Theoretically, we could, I suppose, we should certainly do it before we send notice to the membership. We don't have to. We could theoretically change it, like, 2 minutes before the meeting because it's just a board procedure. Maybe next meeting is probably a good idea to like think a bit more specifically. I guess all I'm saying is that theoretically there's nothing stopping us from doing whatever. But yeah.
Can't wait to personally hold 200 proxy votes. You are cool.
Yes.
The other question I have for folks is ideally like to move forward with approving this, the implementation plan now. But if you feel as if you want to postpone to the next meeting, that is also amendable to me. I do want to make sure that everyone has read it thoroughly and is comfortable with what's there. Also, the staff are available, well, some of them are, to answer any questions you might have about particular items. So if you're wondering, what does this actually mean, et cetera, you may have that conversation now. Chen and then Matthew.
I just had a note on the format of this document. Thank you for preparing it. It would be useful for me personally to have these items in more of a chronological order, because it's easier to keep track of which things are like higher priority if you can see, say, X, Y, and Z are ready or are targeted for winter term, and these things are targeted for spring term, these in May. So I think a view like that could be useful in the future.
Okay. Matthew?
It's something just occurred to me, just for my own information. This is a question mostly to Matt. Part of one of the goals here outlined in some of the operational goals is lease review and comparison of 5 major housing companies in Kitchener-Waterloo. And that's like, have lawyers look at them and see if we can then publish it or give some advice to students on it and such. And one of the notes for board engagement on that is that that item would go to the Municipal Affairs Committee for further discussion and scoping of work. But there'd be, there's an internal staff lead that's the advocacy and stakeholder relations manager. And is that sort of way of putting that work onto a committee and putting that type of discussion around what that really means and then scoping of it to direct the staff, sort of, is that how the board should be thinking of using committees? And is that how that sort of works here? And is this a good example of that, or is it a little bit different, if that makes sense? That's a little bit of a ramble.
Yeah, no worries. I'd say that, the committee aspect, certainly in the draft policy manual, I think you'll find the committee's a lot more functional than topical. So I think there's nothing wrong with having a committee sort of oversee the compilation of a specific piece of work and recommend it back to board. That's mostly what ad hoc committees kind of do. I think the question is, do you let committees get into the operational work of actually writing it themselves, which that's probably properly reserved for staff. And also you don't want, you guys are too big for that. That's grunt work.
Cool. Thank you.
I'm not seeing anything else here. So I will motion to move it further resolve board task executive.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Chen.
Yeah. A lot of the dates that are listed in this implementation plan have passed, for example, like November 2022. Are those items completed, or would they need like a revised date?
To my knowledge, most of them are completed. Which ones are you pointing to?
I was just curious in general. Yeah. There are a couple scattered across the.
My reading of it, a lot of the November ones are like they start in November and then went onwards, or they are things that we've already wrapped up. So for instance, when it comes to the municipal election stuff, like that's done. But yeah, I don't think that there's anything we need to reschedule.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I have pinged.
Yes.
I was wondering how many people actually have had chance to get through it. I know that I haven't. I don't want to hold things up, but like, if not a lot of us have, then maybe I would suggest that we can do it.
Hey Siri, what time in UK right now? Oh,
What time is it in UK right now?
5 hours ahead, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, the other thing that we can do is we could amend the motion to just say like, hey, start working off of this general sort of schedule thing. Maybe we can get it organized in chronological order, and then we can provide further feedback on that. And then deal with it next meeting if that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I couldn't get through to it, but it would be.
Sorry,
actually.
I realized that I should have drawn more attention to it to make sure folks read it. I need to start putting like little, if you don't like, if you come across this line in this thing, email me and I'll give you $5. Right? Like as a reading test. I don't know. Maybe I'll do learn quizzes. Okay. If that's how you want to proceed, then I would like to put that to a vote probably. So if you want to motion to amend this where I know you come up with the language.
This is something that's
Language for
want to
start doing this right now. We finalize it. Okay, I feel like
budget.
In that,
Or okay,
I
here's
feel like that's almost kind of
like there would be money, there would be
say
we
we start working of this from now and then.
there would be
okay,
costs.
here's what
but
we'll
have
do. We'll just
obviously there's money involved. But I believe that we intend to put our legal stuff in. We have it in the general.
Yeah, that makes
Gets
sense.
it. There's money for lawyers.
It just
I think that'll
no stuff. If it was like
this aspect.
to be honest, like if we were,
Yeah.
you know, right.
Like if we're saying,
it'd be like we.
Guys,
Stuff like that, it's fine. Sorry.
when you start having side conversations, it messes with the thing.
yeah, I think if we could just like table this until next meeting, we like that would be ideal.
I just want to highlight that we missed the last 30 seconds. If you could repeat that.
We were just having a conversation over whether or not it made sense to postpone the consideration of this motion until next meeting, or if it was better to say, hey, work on the schedule, but then amend it afterwards. And it was brought up that maybe that isn't necessarily fair to say, hey, here's the thing, but also we might switch it up on you. That's the opinion that was expressed. Okay, but I will take Naman as motioning to postpone decision on this until the subsequent meeting of board. Do I have a seconder on that?
That's not fun.
Okay, no, so then that motion is not going to be considered. So moving on to it further resolved the board tasked the executive director and president with ensuring the roadmap's progress and reporting any major changes in the proposed timelines to board. Do I have a seconder for that one? Dowd. Okay. For this one, I will take a proper vote. For all in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay.
Nervous?
Depends if anyone votes against.
No.
Hand down. All against. All abstaining. Would you like that noted?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Go through this myself.
I will also abstain on this, just because I feel like I don't have a sense of everyone else's comfort level with moving forward with things. So I can't read your minds, unfortunately. Okay, cool. Moving on. Committee work plan and schedule. Okay, this also had a briefing note accompanied with it. You're going to have to learn very quickly for upcoming board meetings that you should read the briefing notes. They took a very long time for me to prepare. So, yay, please read them. But my SparkNotes version of it is, hey, we got called out for not being super transparent or easy to follow by Imprint, which is a completely fair things that has been said. So really trying to improve that this term. So over the break, I played Stardew Valley, but I also made a committee spreadsheet. I tried to organize it based on not making all committees just happen in 1 week, keeping in mind when Senate was, all that other sort of stuff, and sort of propose a schedule. Also outlined sort of a work plan for the committees, so what folks can anticipate that committee will work through for the remainder of this term. Some things might not happen. It really depends on capacity and interest, but I hope it gives folks a general sort of overview of it. One thing I do want to make sure, though, is we are using our committees in ways that make sense. So I would like to ask board to adopt the motion that you see on the board there, just to give a little bit more direction to the Student Experience Advisory Committee. And just for background, we have specific things on the roadmap there. We also have a bunch of like reports that exist that we haven't actually translated into any advocacy stances. They just kind of exist and they're sitting there. So it would be nice to have them into actual advocacy stances and actual plans to sort of move forward with. So really hoping that we can use the Student Experience Advisory Committee, given its composition, because it would be best place to get a sort of multi-campus view on those items to use it, but also provide a specific place to hear updates on some of board's progress on different items. So given that currently the committees are sort of topical, board receiving information on how we've been progressing on these items in a way that's more open to the general student body, that's going to be occurring there. And if folks would like, we can have the committee pass on briefing notes or whatnot to the entirety of board, if that would help. But yeah, so here's the thing. I'm not going to read it all to you. Do I have a seconder? Okay, 10 seconds. Do we have any discussion on that? Naman?
Yeah, so I was wondering, given that the accessibility stuff is going through USRC, does SEAC have like visibility into that? Like, I don't know, are there board members that are like on both committees or something like that? Like, how do they actually make sure that this is coming along?
So USRC, I believe the board members who are in USRC are also on that committee. Or might have
I'm on
been
USRC and I'm not on SEAC.
Oh, okay. Then I would suppose the way that would travel would be, it would be my responsibility as someone who sits on that to
Okay.
provide updates to that end.
All right.
Okay. Seeing no other discussion, or Jen?
I wanted to comment. Yeah, sort of honing in the mandates of the SEAC committee towards these various accessibility and diversity and inclusion issues sounds good to me. It's pretty similar to what I arrived to at looking through some of the SEAC's potential projects. I just wanted to get a bit of clarification on the point where SEAC could be a ear for receiving various advocacy reports. Are these advocacy reports coming from other board committees, or are they coming from WUSA staff or somewhere else?
I think they're coming from staff and directors.
Staff and directors.
Yes.
Okay. So the other committees would report into SEAC?
So the other committees exist in their own sort of world. So any update on housing stuff generally gets discussed more in depth at, say, MAC, and then a general summary gets then forwarded to be accepted or reviewed by board so that they also know that things are happening.
Okay. So which directors would report to SEAC?
So the folks who sit on SEAC.
Nice.
Yeah, because we've specifically organized directors based on, at least for each cluster, there's at least one director on the committee that has a relevant thing to it. So yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's a little bit convoluted. This is me working within how things are currently structured. I am open to seeing what changes in the committees are proposed by the consultants, and that might lead to different sort of pathways and stuff, but this is sort of how I set it up for this term. Okay. Oh, Chen?
You made a note in your recommendations,
yes,
in the briefing to allocate more budget for food.
Yes.
Is that anything?
I didn't have time to calculate the exact amount, so I will bring that to Finance Committee.
Okay, thank you. Is there any money right now set towards the committees?
Yes, but it's hidden in a bunch of little pots everywhere. I think it would be a lot easier for me just to have a specific sort of budget line to draw upon for these purposes. Right now I'm pulling from special projects, the entertainment or whatnot. Like the budget is very much designed based on our previous system. So now it's a little bit funky to figure out where things go. And it makes it confusing to calculate. But anyways, I hope we can agree. And I guess if anyone has any objections, speak so now. But I think it's just nice when you have committee meetings and stuff to provide food or different opportunities or things to make members feel appreciated and valued. So, okay. So I'm moving this. Do I have a seconder? 10 seconds. So all opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, all abstaining, please raise your hand. Okay, so that passes unanimously. Moving on here, presentation of Reddit rules of engagement. Oh, look, we have a Stacy friend. Do you want to share your screen? Are we going to scroll through the subreddit together?
So up close all the time.
Oh, come on.
You just let me know when I'm ready. I'm not sure if I missed something there. Sorry. Hi, everyone.
Hi. No, you're good to go.
I'm good to go? Okay, amazing. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, great. You're all in one place right now for the most part. That's great. Thanks for having me tonight. Hi, everyone. I'm Stacy Sage, Manager Communications and Media Relations. I think we've all sort of met in training beforehand, but it's been a long term and a long holiday break, so I just wanted to refresh that. I'm going to share my screen here quickly. Sorry, you'll see yourself maybe for a second, and then I'm just going to go into present mode. And I'm going to get kicked off here. So thanks for having me here this evening. Hello, everyone. This should be about 5 minutes or so. I'll try to zip through it as quickly as possible without missing the important details. So WUSA Reddit Rules of Engagement by WUSA Communications. This is for the board presentation tonight, January 12th, 2023. So just a little quick overview. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Reddit space, it is a community of communities and can be difficult to navigate because of its uniqueness as a social platform. It's a melting pot of trends, media, micro communities, micro cultures, inside jokes, and mostly anonymity, which adds to its trickiness. Right now, Reddit is home to more than 1.5 billion users and has more visitors than Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. There we go. So what brings us here tonight? At UWaterloo, we have a highly active and engaged Reddit community, our UWaterloo, with over 86,000 members and hundreds of followers online at any given time. This community on Reddit allows WUSA to engage with members where they are, making us more accessible to our members, which is one of our long-range plan priorities. And then I've just got a little clip here of the UWaterloo group. A positive note on that one. Wholesome things about UWaterloo this year, which is lovely. So whether you're an experienced Redditor or ready to try a whole new platform, if that means a better way to connect with the students you represent, these rules for engagement and tips to succeed are meant to provide you with guidance and information on how to best navigate the space as a WUSA board member. So basically, how do we get started here? What Reddit account can board of directors use? You can use your existing Reddit account if you're comfortable pivoting to WUSA content. That does mean that all of your prior history will be potentially available to this group and anyone they come across. Or you can create a new account centered around your work as a board member, and then you can have that until you're done your term, and then you can throw that account away. Whatever you do choose, please let me know what your account name is, so we can kind of keep track of that. We're learning too in the space. And then be sure to adhere to WUSA's Digital Communication Policy Agreement, which you have all been already trained on. So really nice and easy. We only have 2 rules for engagement. The first one is be transparent about who you are and represent. If you are going to engage in the space, when you are responding to questions or participating in a conversation, please be clear when you post that you are a WUSA Board of Director. You can do that by introducing yourself at the start of your post, or you can use a creative sign-off at the end. Once you have posted, please copy a link to the conversation and just share it back with me, so we can just keep track of that conversation, because again, we're learning in the space as well. And if you do want to engage in the space, if you're new to it and you're just really not sure how to navigate, or if you want some help coming up with an answer or crafting a post, you can just reach out to me on Teams or an email, and we can go from there. We can meet for 15, 20 minutes, whatever that is, and I can help you work that out. So the second rule is to protect the WUSA brand. So just remember, if you are using Reddit as a board of director, you will want to be sure your WUSA hat is on nice and tight. So just imagine that you're responding to a student during your office hours on campus. That's the tone and the approach you'll want to take anytime you are representing WUSA as a board of director. So you want to be authentic, helpful, polite, compassionate, and then offer other ways for them to get in touch outside of the platform. So in terms of tips for succeeding, we do have a few more of those because Reddit is in such a unique space. So the first one is have a thick skin and proceed with caution. Reddit can be a little bit tricky because of that anonymity. So that openness means that you will potentially cross paths with inspiring, generous, and wise people, as well as racist, sexist, homophobic, and hateful people and the content that they share. So that's where that thick skin comes in nice and handy. And then remember that Redditors get very political. We love that. We want people actively participating in democracy. But as a WUSA representative, you must remain nonpartisan in your approach. So choose those clicks and conversations with care. Second tip is to listen and learn. Reddit provides an opportunity to engage with, listen to, and answer questions from our members. If you do use that platform with those goals in mind, it will give you focus. Don't go in looking for a fight, otherwise you might end up finding one. And what we just recommend is just use Reddit to see what student members are talking about. What are their gripes? What are the needs that they have? What are they complaining about in there? You can answer questions, you know the answers to in there as well. And then engage when you think it might be insightful, and then just move on. Third tip is to experiment bravely. So Reddit is different than all the other social medias that are out there. And what we say is just embrace it for its unique value and culture. Reddit provides an opportunity to engage with, listen to, and answer questions. And then sometimes we might even be responsible for starting conversations within the space, but we'll get to that a little bit later in the next couple of weeks or so. And your fourth tip for succeeding is to engage like a human. When you're genuine, you can build karma in the space, and that's a number indicating how much people like your content and your posts. You will have a posting history that people can see, and then that shows other Redditors that you're credible and have good intentions. Once you get a little bit more familiar with the space, you can start really using it to engage. But I'd say up until then, probably just do the listening, see how other people are commenting in the space, see what resonates with you. You'll see what you like, what you don't like. And then once you sort of get a feel for it, that's when you can kind of go in and start answering those questions. And then finally, leave promotions to WUSA marketing. Self-promotions is just not really a thing that goes on in Reddit. Definitely there's space for it. But what you'll really want to make sure is anytime you're in a space, make sure you know those subreddit rules and what they like and don't like. And then again, just leave that promotion up to us in the WUSA marketing team. We'll help you out there. And then just always remember you're engaging on Reddit to have conversations and be genuinely helpful. I would suggest sharing links only when they are 100% relevant. It's good practice to provide more than just links, such as explanations on how the information in the links answer the person's questions or meet their needs. So in closing for this one, just remember, like all social media platforms, Reddit represents a small portion of our member audience base. It's a great platform to engage, listen, and meet members where they are, but at the end of the day, it is an anonymous social media platform and doesn't exclusively represent our student members. Okay, and then just some next steps. You've all been given a copy of the Reddit Rules of Engagement and Tips to Succeed in the PDF that Esther sent around with the rest of the board documents for tonight. Please read through that if you haven't already. And then we ask that you complete that Reddit agreement in forms by Wednesday, January 15th. That's next Wednesday. And the link to the agreement can be found at the bottom of that Rules and Tips PDF. If you do need it, let me know. I can definitely help you in the right direction and guide you where you need to go. And that's basically it for Reddit tonight. Does anyone have any questions, comments? Nope.
Oh, wait, I'm chair.
Sorry.
Hi. JC, am I allowed to shit post on my regular Reddit? If it's not like offensive or homophobic or something like that, it's just weird.
Yeah, can we chat it through before you hit the trigger on that one completely? I'm comfortable with that. I just want to see kind of what you're thinking right now.
Okay. I'll send you a few examples.
Okay, that sounds good.
That was a mistake.
Sorry. Okay, I didn't see what order you put your hands up in, so I'm gonna go. Okay, Shen, Jeff.
I'll go last if someone else has.
Okay.
Yeah, is there an email that you would prefer we send our Reddit conversations to?
Yeah, you can send it to me at s3sage@wusa.ca, or you can even just Teams me the link if that's easier for you. So Stacy Sage in Teams or s3sage@wusa.ca. I'm also in the full-time directory for WUSA.
And
again,
thank you. I also have a quick comment. I find it interesting, a bit risky to use previous accounts sometimes because, you know, it's very easy and people do often browse through your history to dig up dirt on Reddit. So I would recommend using existing accounts with great care.
Agree.
So I suppose
Absolutely.
you'll probably be vetting them if we submit some existing accounts, I imagine.
Yeah, I more just as a heads up, I think that really goes back to the individual. If you are comfortable knowing that history is now going to be a little bit more open and you've lost that anonymity yourself if you do that, because you will be then representing WUSA and sharing that you are who you are essentially, right? So I agree, but some accounts are already sort of set up to navigate the space right now. So if you want to continue with those, then by all means, or if you have really nothing you want to hide, so to speak, not that we do necessarily, but then go for it and use it. But otherwise, I would say that option number 2 is probably better.
Before we go to Dowd, just wanted to add one additional thing for context. So accompanying this presentation is a motion. Just basically these sort of rules and stuff, they're proposed by staff, but ultimately I think it needs to be board's decision to hold itself accountable to a certain set of rules and mandates and whatnot. So this technically, sorry, Stacey, isn't set in stone yet until we adopt that. So if people have specific concerns about policies and whatnot, that's something we can have a discussion about. But broadly, I'll say like this is like very insightful. It makes sense to me. It very much, respects students' ability to engage with folks in Reddit and recognizes the fact that it's hard Waterloo and it's very hard to avoid. But yeah, checked it out.
Can I send you a Reddit account that I've been using for WUSA over the past year and a half to review and see if I've done anything that I shouldn't do, or if what I've been doing so far is basically what we should be doing.
Yeah, please do. That would be great. And I imagine you probably are doing what you're supposed to be doing. And that's exciting to hear that you've been doing it for so long. Thank you. I probably will not have a look at that till tomorrow and then circle back.
No worries. No worries.
Great. Thank you.
I deleted it.
Jeff and Mike Catherine.
Yeah, so just to clarify with option one, if we use our existing Reddit accounts and post in some official, like as a WUSA director, can we still post in a personal capacity on that account? Or is that meant to just be a WUSA account for the duration of our, do all the policies apply to all content during the term of our office?
Yeah, and that's where it gets a little tricky, because if then you are more political, or if you are kind of doing some other things that aren't sort of WUSA board-ish over on that account, then I think you're kind of getting into some of that gray area. But if you typically do stay quite wholesome, nonpartisan,
Okay.
You don't think it's kind of going to encroach on those other areas, then I'd say you're good to go.
Gotcha. Thanks. And one more quick addendum, I guess. This just popped into my head as we were speaking. Reddit has like different flares. Do we want to have all our like WUSA accounts have the same flare or something to make them easily identifiable?
I just I'm engineering, so I use the purple color, and then I just say WUSA director. That's my flip.
Mine just said resident student government show.
Yeah, and Steph, I'll let you, I don't know how we fold that in, if that's another piece that we end up adding to, because I think that's a good idea. I think there probably, I don't know if there's more discussion that would have to come of that, or what the process looks like.
I would frankly advise against that, just because any accounts that are set up like specifically just to show a certain thing tend to be viewed in a more negative light, as opposed to, you know, I think it would be viewed charitably for someone to be like, hey, this is like my account that's associated with my name or whatnot. Like, I want to be helpful to people. So like, here's the thing. But I think as soon as it seems like a unified sort of brand, then it really goes against the sort of ethos that guides Reddit. So I would just be wary. I think you have to really find the compromise of, you know, like accountability and making sure that you don't make WUSA look bad, but also like, if you're a shill, make fun of yourself for being so, and like be your own individual as well, because anything else will get you like eaten alive, frankly.
Okay.
Steph, am I good? Okay. I forget exactly what it was. I think that in the guidelines thing, you mentioned including when we're just like responding in an existing conversation, so like commenting, we should also pass along what's going on. How does that apply when, for instance, we're in the WUSA subreddit, but what if we're just, should we be sending basically every comment that we make from that account, or is it just when it's WUSA related?
I'd say just when it's WUSA related, and if you're involved in a conversation, I probably only need to know like the first tidbit of that conversation, and then that's it, and then we can monitor sort of the rest from there.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I keep on thinking I have more questions, and then I think about them for a second longer, and I'm like, I think it's okay.
Eventually want to explore making somebody from WUSA a mod on Reddit.
Sorry, what was, did you ask?
I feel like the mods would not be happy. I mean, I'll let Naman reply to that, but I would not.
I'm gonna say the mods might not necessarily want that. Like, we don't control the subreddit.
Yeah.
And B, even if we did, this goes, you know, what Steph was talking about, where you don't really want to look like a brand or an authority or something. You just want to show up as like a person. And when you have that power imbalance of like one of us is a moderator, then you can't really do that, right? Because then you have potential for all sorts of these things like, oh, they're like suppressing negative feedback because one of them is a moderator. They will throw these accusations at you even if they don't necessarily hold true, right? So yeah, that's just a thing to be wary about. And yeah, I don't personally think that's a good idea.
Okay. Right up for discussion.
Yeah, I would say just let Reddit be Reddit. There's no controlling it. There's really not. That's a losing battle. Okay. I guess if there's no more questions, and if folks have very specific sort of questions about what's appropriate, what's not, maybe just touch base with Stacy, and if it's something that we think needs to be distributed to everyone, we can do the frequently asked questions or type thing. But I would like to move on to the specific motion that actually makes these rules binding in some way. So pull those up onto the thingy-mabob. I think that's a cue for Esther to share, or if I to share. Right.
I was expecting that conversation to go a lot worse.
Okay. So the motion is be it resolved that board approves the adoption of Reddit rules of engagement as a component of the director's code of conduct. Do we have a seconder for that? Okay. Okay. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining?
Posting opposition on Reddit.
I'm gonna have to abstain here because I don't know, I have very specific feelings about Reddit. And I would like that noted. Thank you very much. Okay. So because I did not see any against or abstaining, I'm going to take it as everyone else is in support. So that motion passes. Congratulations, accountability. Moving on to the last item, which I will let Denver speak to.
Thank you.
Hi, folks. So around this one, basically just it's not super clear for officers how professional development's supposed to work. Generally, I believe my understanding is that it comes from a couple budget lines, but there's not like a specifically allocated budget for officers, and we're kind of just operating off of a, I guess, like an understanding type piece. So it's not super clear. Steph and I were looking to possibly access this. We were also looking to access this after our terms because we didn't super know the details about it, and we were interested in a not-for-profit class that starts right after our term, which has its own complications. So our intent is we're going to submit a letter, just trying to clarify the general rules around it and kind of getting a little bit of a better understanding of how it should be utilized. And then also probably with a request coming from our end. Obviously, there's a huge bias in this, so I think the approach is going to be we pretty well just leave it with you folks and let you discuss. And then if you have any questions at the end, feel free to ask us. We just kind of wanted to prep on it now that it was coming because it's kind of a weird one. So I don't know if folks wanted the time between now and then to consult anybody or kind of think about it, but we thought maybe it's best to just give folks a little time to chew on it and think about it. I think that's about all I have to say on it.
Yeah, just to provide a little bit additional context. So there's really sort of two things that I think we're trying to get at with this. One is, okay, so apparently there's a board procedure that says that exec don't get professional development funding. So there's a procedure that has to do with like staff and how they qualify, yada, yada, yada. But it explicitly says exec don't get access to professional development. Now that is counter to what we have been doing in practice over the last couple of years. there's also specifically like budget lines, and I believe the budget line, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, it's conferences, professional development / travel. So everything within that line is supposed to be pulled from that bucket. So by virtue of approving that budget, they're presumably approving, you know, professional development or whatnot. So I don't know, it's a little bit weird, the current system that we have set up. So would like more clarity over whether or not board really thinks that the exec should have access to it. Should be something that should be enforced, and whoopsie doopsie that we didn't. The other sort of separate question we would have would be whether or not it is appropriate for specifically us, but I guess directors down the road to have access to professional development opportunities that might sort of happen after their term. So the course thing that we were looking at, it's not offered until like the spring term. Like if it was in winter, I would try and take it in winter. And we'll send you all the details and stuff like that. But I'm sort of taking the approach here of it's important to uplift student leaders and young professionals. And this has been a really weird, hard job, and it would be nice to contextualize everything that's happened sort of after the fact. So having access to that would be a nice thing that would make this experience more rewarding. Obviously, you can take a different point of view that professional development is only for the org. And if you're not working for the org any longer, you don't get access to that. That's fair entirely. But yeah, just for that background. And if there's anything specific you have any questions on, you want to see in the letter that we send, let us know.
So I wanted some context on, if we know this, why execs were specifically excluded previously, because seems to be an intentional thing. I can't see an obvious reason why they would be, but like clearly they did it for some reason, and I would like to know what that reason was, if we can know that.
If I could chime in on this, I might direct your question to Suzanne if she's in the call. Or Mike, if either you wanted to tackle this. I would say one conceptually piece is that like technically we're going to be leaving really quickly, so it's not really an investment in the org.
I think Matthew had a response on that.
That's the thing I was going to say is that was my thinking about it, was that like the purpose of president of professional development is not really for the staff member, it is for the org. And we spend money on that to develop human capital to improve, operational outcomes. To put it in very not caring about individuals terms. And I would imagine that was why it was done. Thinking about it now, although I actually didn't know that we had that written in there specifically until now, I imagine that was why.
There's a lot of policies and procedures, and we only came across it sort of then because it seemed, I didn't expect that to be there, but now that we've seen it, I think it's important to do our due diligence and bring that up to board and seek clarification before anything further is spent on the professional development side thing. Jeff, you had a question?
It was exactly.
Okay. Well, we will have the proposal and whatnot for you a little bit later.
Yeah. Wait, sorry. I guess you mentioned to stop. Has anything been sent to professional development to this?
Yes. You want me to like use examples and stuff?
No, I was just kidding.
But yes, it has been. The nonprofit sort of class certificate thing was something that a previous president had done a couple of years ago, which is how we ended up coming across it. There's been sort of the student union development summit that constitutes as professional development. So it's something that myself, Catherine, and Matthew attended, and Ben had the previous sort of year as well. There's also been sort of opportunities to learn a little bit more about like municipal affairs by attending. Well, it's for that one, it was a little bit like of a mixture of like doing job tasks, but also learning things. But yeah, there's some opportunities that lie here and there. I've purchased like governance books and stuff to review to help myself with the org. It's like a whole range of things. But having a more developed policy would be nice there. But that's just to give you a sense of stuff that like what I'm aware of that's been used for.
Thank you.
Yeah. I guess my preliminary opinion on this is that I feel like it makes sense for execs to be able to access the budget because, you know, it will help you run the org. I don't know how I feel about them accessing the budget after they're done with their role. I do subscribe to the, you know, it is for the org after all standpoint. I don't know how students will feel about their money going to like causes that, you know, don't benefit them. Yeah, that's basically the gist of it.
Catherine?
I think I'm in a similar place of feeling a little bit funny about the way of using professional development funding specifically, but given the weird circumstances, I would be curious if there's an option for us to specifically approve like a small, I don't know, bonus thing to facilitate attending it. I just want to be careful about how like the precedent that we're setting for what professional development is, if that makes sense. Because I would love to be able to facilitate it in some way, although Matthew is making faces.
Yeah. Yeah, and let me know if you would like Denver or I to step out of the room, or if you want to carry on this conversation a little bit sort of later. This might need to be something that happens in an in-camera session as well. But yeah, we'll go to Chen and then go to Matthew, and then maybe we can sort out details later.
Steph, if it's okay, I think I'm just going to step out at this point, just because it feels like folks are getting into a little bit of nitty gritty. I think our intent wasn't this meeting, but I'm going to step out and someone just message me when I should hop back in, because I think that's more appropriate.
It probably makes sense for that. That's where this discussion is going right now.
You're having a discussion then. Okay, whatever. Later.
Okay, spell Steph on the board. I turn out Chen.
I think it's, even though I don't think it was either Denver or staff's fault that they recognized that PD funding was not allowed to be spent by officers. If what I'm understanding is correct, then the spending of those funds are a violation of board policy. And I think that should be something to be addressed. Not necessarily punitively. We just need to figure out what resolving that looks like, whether it's returning that funding or making a motion to retroactively allow for that funding. But I think I just want to point to this topic and say, I think this is very important.
Yeah, was there someone else? Did you put your hand up?
No.
Is there anyone online? I'll say something.
Funding?
Sorry?
Who used this funding?
This is professional development funding. It's been actually a relatively long-standing thing, and it's used by, in this case, many staff have it, but in this case, obviously the officers using it and the execs previously for some sort of professional development, something that teaches them things to better do their job.
Like an online course.
Online course, exactly, or a conference or something.
And it's being used, has it been used recently?
It has been. It's been used this year. It's been used last year. As I said, I was an exec last year. I actually was not clear of this line, which isn't great. I would point to that our documents are very esoteric. But
Technically,
it's been used.
Okay.
I don't think anyone's ever like done it with the knowledge that they weren't supposed to. As Steph said, it's been a number of years that's been common practice. So I don't think there's anything after seeing that sort of thing. There's no like, oh, well, do we have to do this? Well, no, I saw the person do it last year do it. So nobody ever looks up something that they saw someone do last year.
Something that
it's just something that's happened and didn't realize. And some things are in a weird spot. For example, Steph cited SUDS and the Town and Gown Association of Ontario events that she's gone to a couple of times, and mine happened to have been to some of a subset of those. And a lot of those are in a weird spot because you could see them through the lens of professional development, but you could also see them through other lenses. Particularly the Town and Gown one, there were specific not operational, is quite the wrong word, but specifically talking to Waterloo planners about Waterloo adjacent housing issues, and that's a very operational thing, as well as attendance of SUDS has been used in the past, and the idea was using it as a way to connect with and build relationships with other WUSA schools to develop plans about what they're going to do WUSA-wise, because a lot of schools go there. My other opinions on SUDS notwithstanding. If there's no one else that was going to say anything, I guess one of the things I was thinking is I think it would make sense going forward. I think that there are oftentimes places where officers and where the org can benefit from officers engaging in professional development. I think we saw that last year. I think that is a legitimate thing. I think it almost certainly the intention was, well, they're not going to be here that long, so we should invest in them in that way. And I can understand that perspective, but that's a little bit invest in them by having them being officers. I think that there is actually value to be gained, even if it is in the shorter term. I am at this point not comfortable with it being after a term, because after their term is over, because that is not of benefit to the org whatsoever. And there's not really that excuse, because then it's not something for the org. Then it is what it is as compensation. It's a benefit. And like, being able to do things like that is what other benefits are for, namely salary. Yeah, that's where my thoughts were at the moment. We don't have a specific thing other than this discussion on the floor. Is there any other points or questions people have? Anything anyone wants to say? Is anyone on the line wanting to talk?
Can you see my hand?
No, I can't. It normally pops up on there, but I will open up Teams on my iPad instead so I can see from now on.
Oh, okay. I can also just open my mic and tell you when anyone hands their hand up. Right now, it's just me. Right. I think I'm on the same page about the usage of professional development after the term. My assumption was always that we just treated executive professional development separately, just because it's tricky to think of, like, to lump them in with all full-time staff. And I always just assumed the existence of the budget line meant that the executive's version of professional development existed because of the way that full-time staff PD was approved and how that doesn't make sense for executives. So it's kind of like a different thing, but a similar thing. So by approving the budget line and the intention there, it is assumed to be okay. Yeah, coming from like I suppose there's bias in that I have interest in the well-being of my friends, where I could see investment through compensation as like a bonus of, hey, we'll pay for you to do this thing after your course so that you can feel like you're gaining more personal value from this job, could improve their ability to do the job better over the next few months. And that's sort of what I'm thinking about as how to justify it within the board's lens in a way that I could see making sense even if they weren't my friends, of like, clearly this is a lot right now. I think that it would be pretty disappointing for them to find out that because if they started their terms in May, in theory, they could have enrolled in last year's version of this. And I know that they knew what they were signing up for. I'm just thinking about how it could still be in the organization's interest to find a way to facilitate giving this as like a thank you, just not as PD.
Jen?
Yeah, I think one of my ideas was that they could come and present these suggestions to the board on a case-by-case basis.
Or going forward to get PD funding or for something or.
Yeah, so now that I've heard more context, I don't think that's appropriate for like all of the existing PD funding, but if they wanted to acquire PD funding for stuff after their tenure, we've done similar things in the past. Last August, we modified, improved the compensation for some of the positions due to the added work. Maybe we can ask board for PD funding to attend a conference after. We can comment on that. And I also wanted to thank kudos to Steph and Denver for locating this and bringing it to the board.
Yeah, is there any other discussion people want to bring forward at this time or anything else?
I guess just should we amend that or discuss amending that board policy, like a procedure?
That is absolutely something we can discuss now. I guess one thing that's on my mind is I know that we are on the verge of rewriting all of our things when the policy manual comes through. That I imagine will be sufficient if we all felt sufficiently in one way. I imagine we could just say, you know, okay, we're just going to say this is our stance on this from now on, and it overrides what's in there right now, just until we get the new procedures built out in the thing. Just because, you know, yeah. If that was something the board wanted to do, that's fully within their ability. But yeah, is that something you want to do or somebody else, or is there any other discussion here? Or?
Yeah, I think I'd be happy to move that since we probably, now that we know this, we probably shouldn't let this continue to be violated. Yeah. So I'd like to move for the board to amend that policy to remove that board policy.
I mean, it's a large board policy. What if we just said that, and this is really bad, I'm only saying we do this because I know we're about to rewrite everything. But we just say that, you know, the board, notwithstanding that line in the board procedure, the board, you know, accepts the officer's use of the professional development funding in the budget for the purpose of their professional development.
I guess I need to.
You can say something different, like.
Sorry, we're in the middle of a motion. Do you mean specifying for this year or specifying in general? In theory, we don't adopt any new policies.
Who said what? Sorry?
I guess I just want to make sure that what the intentions of your wording were, which is in the hypothetical situation where we do not rewrite all of our policies, is this resolution supposed to stand for this governing year, for these officers, or in general?
I think it's in general.
I would think we could say until our policy is rewritten. Or, okay, maybe, okay, no, I would imagine we should say until the end of the year because we should otherwise be amending a thing because we should not have some weird line in some minutes somewhere that override our policy or our procedure, sorry, forever. So I would say until the end of this year when we are expecting that these things will be rewritten. Just because if that's a decision, if we want to clarify our stance on that right now, but we're not obviously in a position to be rewriting a whole bunch of policies.
Governing year?
Governing year.
April 30, 2023.
Yes. That'd be my view.
Right. Yeah, the thing I wanted to ask was, does this also include the thing that was being talked about, that is the professional development funding for the thing after the term is over? That was
sort of going to be my next question to the floor is, how do people feel about that? I made my views clear. And I would say that I don't think that should be a thing. I think that's a jump from the norm and something that would, number one, want more discussion on, but as of right now, I disagree with. But is there other views around the table?
Yeah, this is not another view. This is the same view, but like supporting that view. I don't think we should be funding something that is after the governing year.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that as well.
Okay. Is there anyone that disagrees with that line of reasoning? I'm not seeing any hands. I'm hoping.
Wait, sorry, I couldn't unmute my mic. I just also wanted to mention something, which is that we passed something last year for $500 of professional development and training for all directors?
Like us or last year's directors?
It's a director compensation policy.
Oh, there is that in the record. There is some amount of professional development funding available to directors, isn't there?
Yeah.
I really don't like making policy on the fly. I suppose.
They also said that we don't have to, this was meant to
Yeah.
be a next meeting thing.
Yeah, I know it was just some amount of the uncomfortableness with like, putting stuff on pause all of a sudden if there are other things. Do we want to leave this sort of thing as is? Or do we want to put in a sort of stopgap solution until, say, next meeting and when we come up with something more reasonable?
I'm happy with leaving it until next meeting, especially since it seems like Steph and Denver will prepare something for proposal. This might not be their entirely fleshed out complete statement for board yet.
Okay, is that reasonable to everybody?
Cool with that, yeah.
Okay, then. We can say that that's, any objections whatsoever? Okay, doesn't sound like it. I will invite Steph back, and if someone can message Denver. Sorry for how scatterbrained I was there. I did not psych myself up for sharing, and unless I think about it a little bit ahead of time, I'm not very good at it. Yeah.
You're sending the message.
No, someone did.
Okay.
Is it a real newspaper?
Is it real news or is it the imprint?
I'll be man.
Well, that was in public section. I shouldn't have said that. I take that back. Aberrage is probably watching this.
Where are we now?
We finished up that discussion. To summarize, would invite you and Brent Denver to come back next meeting with a bit of a proposal around the sort of proposal around this.
Okay.
And I don't know if I get into right now what the board sort of was thinking or not. I guess it's fine. We didn't take a decision. You're going to be aware of it. It doesn't matter right now. I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Okay. Anyways, we have to move into other business now. Do we have any other business? Okay. Seeing none, can I get a motion to move into confidential session? Okay. Matthew, so you all pretty much raise your hands around the same time. Okay. Approval of the agenda.